So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Mansi, and I am an economic and social analyst at Social Justice Ireland. It's great to have all of you here. So before we dive into the presentation, I want to give a brief introduction to who we are. Social Justice Ireland is an independent think tank and justice organization committed to building a just society. Our work focuses on evidence-based policy, equality, and long-term sustainability, all of which are central to today's discussion. I'd also like to take a moment to thank Coalition 2030 for part funding this project. Coalition 2030 is an alliance of over 70 civil society organizations working to ensure Ireland keeps its promise to achieve the SDG goals, both home and abroad. So, um, I'll begin with a quick overview of what I'll cover in this presentation. I'll start with a bit of background on how well-being became a policy priority in Ireland and the key developments so far. Then I'll look at the government's current wellbeing framework before moving on to Social Justice Ireland's alternative approach, which includes our methodology, how we score each dimension, and what the key findings are. Finally, I'll conclude with our proposed policy framework for a fairer future. So let's begin with the journey so far. As you can see, the commitment to a wellbeing framework was first established in 2020 program for government. The idea was to address the limitations of traditional economic measures and create a more rounded, holistic view of how Irish society is actually doing. And to use this evidence systematically across policymaking, including in setting budget priorities, evaluating programs, and reporting progress, which is now happening. So since then, the government's framework has gone through several stages, and the first one was in July 2021, when the first report was published, this was a major milestone as it outlined the vision, ambition for the framework, as well as the initial structure, which was broadly based on OECD's house life model. Later in the year, it was followed by a development of the Wellbeing Portal along with the CSO's Wellbeing Information Hub, which is an interactive dashboard, and all the information gets updated in real-time basis, and you can still find it on CSO's website. After that, in June 2022, the second report was published, and this again was a major milestone as it explicitly recognized equality and sustainability as essential pillars of well-being, a very important step, and we welcome this. In the third report, a new methodology was introduced that assessed indicator across 4 lenses, which included national trend, international performance, equality, and sustainability. And this was a much more robust approach. And for the first time, equality and sustainability were fully integrated into the metrics. We welcome this development as well. However, in 2024, the fourth report moved away from this. And instead of measuring equality and sustainability explicitly, these were reduced to narrative discussions only, and the current framework continues to take this approach. And we believe that this shift has important implications for how we interpret well-being in Ireland, and it's one of the reasons why an alternative approach is needed. So now, this dashboard is taken from the government's report, Understanding Life in Ireland, published this year, and it's based on a set of 35 indicators spread across 11 dimensions. The pink bars show Ireland's trend, essentially how we've performed over a 5-year period. The purple bars show Ireland's international score, so here we compare against other EU or OECD countries for the most recent available data. What this means is the higher the score, the higher the score, it means that Ireland's doing well, and in terms of the international performance, it is closer to being a top performer. Now, along the top, you'll see a small leaf symbol besides each dimension. And that simply means that those dimensions include sustainability indicators. And at the bottom axis, you'll see the groups with the lowest relative outcomes with each dimension. So now, if now at the face of it, Ireland appears to be doing exceptionally well. If we look at the graph out of the 11 dimensions, only one, which is the environment, climate, and biodiversity dimension, shows a negative value on both trend and international performance. There's only one other dimension that has a negative international score, which is time use dimension. And there are two others that have a negative trend score. Everything else seems to be moving in a positive direction, or at least they don't have a negative scores. So I don't know about you, but there were a couple here that really surprised me. And one of the most, like the clearest one, is housing and built environment. Housing is one of the most serious and persistent challenges affecting people today, and we all know that. Yet the dashboard still paints a positive, like broadly positive picture showing progress, which I believe that doesn't align with what many people are actually experiencing. So of course, this largely comes down to what is being measured and how it's being evaluated. But before we get into that, I would like to also show you the government's 2024 dashboard. So this was taken from the 2024 report, and I'm showing it here because for last year's edition of our report, we actually recalculated the government's indicator using their own 2023 methodology, which we believe was a much more robust approach and also forms the basis of our alternative framework. So here is what the dashboard looks like when we apply the government's more rigorous 2023 methodology to the same data used in 2024. While I haven't gone into the full methodology yet, just to summarize, the performance score, which is the orange bar, combines national trend and international comparison, which I explained earlier. And the sustainability aspect, which is the green bar, also uses the same metric, but only for those indicators tagged as sustainable. Equality is a bit different. So the equality score measures the relative percentage difference between the best performing group and the worst performing group. So what we need to remember is that in this score, a value of 1 indicates perfect equality. So the further the score is from 1, the larger the inequality. So as you can see here very clearly, even though the dimension housing and built environment appears to perform well overall, which is like here in the center, the equality score is roughly around minus 0.4. So that represents a 140% gap between the best performing and the worst performing groups. A huge disparity that simply doesn't show up in the government's presentation. So even with no changes to the choice of indicators, the moment you put back equality back into the picture, the disparities become visible again. So this brings us to the alternative well-being framework. And really the reason we are here today is because how we measure progress shapes these policy decisions. And if the framework doesn't tell the full story, then the decisions based on it won't address those problems either. So before I show you our results, I want to briefly walk you through the methodology we used, how we chose our indicators, and how everything is scored. Social Justice Ireland carried out a survey over summer in 2022. And this was done to get a better understanding of what people themselves prioritize when they think about well-being. So we shared it across through our social media, weekly digest, members bulletin, and the respondents were asked to rank 6 possible indicators for each dimension from 1 to 6, with 6 being the most important. And based on those responses, we proposed a set of alternative indicators. And in some of the cases, the public's priorities matched the government's choices. And the original indicators were kept, but in many dimensions, different indicators ranked higher, and those were selected because they reflected uh, what people said mattered for well-being. So again, like take housing and built environment, for example. Housing cost overburden, which is also a government's indicator, was retained because it speaks directly to affordability. But indicators like new dwelling completions or average distance to everyday services, well, they do definitely provide some context. They don't really capture people's well-being concerns. So instead, respondents prioritized indicators such as at risk of poverty rate after rent or mortgage interest and mortgage debt burden. Now, these indicators give a much clearer picture of the financial strain facing households, especially renters and low-income families, and this highlighted the unequal distribution of housing of affordability. Another dimension, work and job quality, had a similar, had a similar thing, while mean weekly earnings, which was a government indicator again, stayed. Other indicators ranked far higher, such as the rate of in-work poverty and the number of long-term unemployed. And this was a pattern that we saw in all the dimensions. So now, once we had the indicators, we needed a consistent way to score them. And for that, we adopted the government's 2023 methodology, the same one we used earlier when recalculating their dashboard. We believe it's a much more holistic approach, and it allows us to look at performance, equality, and sustainability together. And here's how it works. So the performance is based on two things: how the indicator has changed over time. Usually it's a 5-year period, depending on the data, and how Ireland compares internationally against the EU or OECD average, and with the best performing country. So we're looking at Ireland internationally, we are looking into both the aspects. And for equality, it is measured as 1 minus the relative difference, percentage difference between the best and the worst performing group. So if the score is 1, that means perfect equality. The further the score drops below, the greater the inequality, because this shows like the gap. And if the gap between the groups is more than 100%, the score becomes negative. For sustainability, any indicator tagged as relevant to sustainability is assessed using the same metric as performance. And using this approach means all our indicators can be scored on the same scale, making it much easier to compare results within and across dimensions. You can find the detailed methodology also in the report. So now that we've talked about the indicators and the methodology, the next question is, what do these scores actually mean? So for performance and sustainability aspects, the scoring works on like a relatively simple idea. A score close to 1 means Ireland is doing well. A score close to 0 means that there hasn't been much change, it's stagnant, while a score close to -1 or like in negative means it's going in the opposite direction. The indicator is deteriorating, or like Ireland's one of the lowest performers internationally. So these scores help us understand how things are going overall, whether we are improving, staying the same, or moving in the wrong direction. Now, the equality score works a little differently. So instead of looking at how Ireland as a whole, it looks at differences between the groups. This can be by sex, age, abilities, education, principal economic status. Like it depends on the indicator. But the key thing to remember in this is that a score of 1 means perfect equality, and that means everyone is doing equally well. There is no gap between the best performing group or the worst performing group. But if the further the score moves away from 1, it means that there is a gap. And if the gap is really large, that more than say 100%, then the score is negative. So if you see an equality score that's quite low or negative, that tells us there are really significant differences between the groups. even if the overall performance looks good on paper. This this is why equality scoring is so important. It helps us understand who is benefiting and who isn't, and it highlights issues that can be completely hidden away in the aggregate numbers. So now we come to our key findings. So this is the table. So this table brings together the performance, equality, and sustainability scores across all the 11 dimensions of our alternative well-being framework. At the bottom of the slide, you can see the color scales, and the one on the left is a color scale for performance and sustainability scores, and the one on the right is for equality. And because, as I explained earlier, the scoring range differs, so does the color scale. Now, looking across the table, there are areas where Ireland is performing, say, relatively well. For example, income and wealth, work and job quality, and connections, community, and participation. Like these are a few of the dimensions. Even in housing and built environment, you can see a positive performance score. But once we bring equality and sustainability into the picture, it becomes much more uneven. So, like in income and wealth and work and job quality, both you can see that they have like a low equality score. There is it's 0.003, so it means there's almost 100% inequality, and then it's negative for work and job quality, and these point to the ongoing, in work poverty, income gaps, and like some of the cohorts like women, single parent households, and people who are unable to work due to long-term health problems are the ones that are affected the most. Now, you can so we also see some progress in another like knowledge, skills, and innovation performance score. However, again, the equality and sustainability score tells a different story, and you can see that like digital skills are the ones that remain uneven across groups, and lifelong learning, which is also a sustainability indicator, and that's why we can see a stagnant sustainability score, shows that Ireland's not building the long-term skill base we need. So overall, these findings show that while Ireland has made progress in some areas, major disparities and structural challenges remain. And when we turn those scores into a dashboard, you can really see the patterns jump out visually. So immediately you can spot the dimensions where performance and equality are weak, for example, subjective well-being. This includes indicators like life satisfaction, social inclusion, and access to public services. And there is like a negative performance score, and like uh, access to public services is one of the key ones because of that, and we all know that we're not satisfied with it. Again, you also see a weak performance, quality and sustainability aspect in environment, climate, and biodiversity. This reflects indicators such as biodiversity loss, access to renewable, affordable energy, the ability to keep homes warm, and greenhouse gas emissions. And while these are environmental issues, they also affect people directly. On a positive note, it also shows that where Ireland genuinely performs well and fairly, such as connections, community, and participation, where both performance and equality are comparatively like strong, and so is sustainability. So these indicators capture real social ties and community engagement. So like overall, the dashboard lets us see everything at a glance. So now, what does all of this mean for policy? At its core, it means Ireland needs a well-being approach and a social contract, and that focuses on areas where people are being left behind. And our findings point directly to key five policy outcomes. The first one being a vibrant economy that serves the common good. A growing economy on its own isn't enough. And our framework shows that even with positive economic trends, issues like in-work poverty, income inadequacy, and housing affordability are still major problems. So if we want a vibrant economy, the benefits need to be shared fairly, not just show up in headline numbers. Decent services and infrastructure is the other one where like well-being, as we all know, like well-being depends so much on the basics: good healthcare, secure housing, education, public services. These are things that you actually rely on. And what we see in the alternative framework is that gaps in healthcare access, there are long waiting lists and housing stress that hit low income households, renters, and other disadvantaged groups hardest. So if we want people to thrive, we need strong, equitable public services that supports them. And of course, none of this is possible without a fair and adequate tax system. Our findings highlight ongoing income inequality and the need for progressive taxation that actually funds the services and infrastructure people depend on. If you want to enhance well-being, everyone needs to contribute fairly, and what we need, and for that, we need a system that does that. Now, trust in institutions also has a huge impact on how people feel about their society, and our framework includes measures of trust and satisfaction with democracy, and the trend is worrying. As we can see, like the confidence is slipping, and without transparency and accountability, even well-intentioned policies won't have the public buy-in. So strengthening civic engagement, rebuilding trust is essential if we want policies to ensure, to genuinely improve well-being. And finally, like long-term well-being isn't possible without sustainability. And for well-being to be meaningful, it has to last. So sustainability is really important about making sure the progress we make today holds up tomorrow and doesn't come at the expense of future generation. That means environmental, social, and economic sustainability working together and not in isolation. Also, a meaningful well-being approach links climate action with social justice. So making sure that we have a just transition that protects the people most affected by these climate changes. And each of these five policy outcomes can be achieved with a new social contract that prioritizes well-being. So all of these five areas for attention must be worked on simultaneously. Thanks. This is like my last slide, and thank you everybody for joining me today.